If you're playing at a high level and you're an athlete, you may already have talent. So talent's going to get you looked at. Talent's going to get you in the door. Talent's going to get the recruiters to look at you. Talent's going to get you to make your teams at the different levels. But what are you going to do to stay there? What are you going to do to keep that position? What are you going to do to even be better than whatever your talent got you to have doors open for you? Every single rep, every single run, every single lift is a receipt. It's a receipt to what you're capable of. It's a receipt to what you can do, right? You can say that you're running. You can say that you're putting in time with your skill sets. You can say that you're lifting. But guess what? When it's time to show if you've really been doing it in the midst of a game, not just everybody else watching you, but you're going to know if you've done it or not. So what's your receipts going to show? Are your receipts going to show that you're just a bunch of talk and you really ain't doing it? Or are your receipts going to show what you're capable of because you put in the work, you put in the time, you found time to do it, and you put in the reps, and you created a nice, strong foundation and has great habits in regards to doing it? Welcome to episode 2 of Let's Talk About It. You say you want to play the next level. Last week we talked about why I had the name and came up with the title for this podcast to be Let's Talk About It. Today we're going to get a little more specific into the different things that we need to do as athletes in order to prepare to be able to play at the next level. You say you want to play at the next level, but here's the question I ask my athletes all the time. What did you do today that proves that you want to play at the next level? Most athletes talk about the big dreams. Most athletes talk about they should be playing more minutes. They should be able to play D1. They should be able to, start whenever they get there. But the ones that create and make the habits are the ones that actually succeed. And how do you create those habits? Through action. Talking ain't going to get us nowhere. Yes, this podcast is called Let's Talk About It, but that's not for you, the athlete, to talk about it. That's for us to talk about things that's going to help you get better and succeed and excel at the stuff that you want to do and that you say you want to do. So the question is, again, what did you do today to provide yourself the proof that you really want to play the next level? Let's talk about it. So the specific thing that we're going to discuss today is setting the foundation. What's the foundation that we're going to create for ourselves? The work that nobody posts. We talked about this last episode. Posting just the great, easy highlight stuff on our social media doesn't really mean that we're doing the correct things and doesn't mean that we're putting forth the right effort. The parts of things that build habit and gets us to excel, and provide the proof to ourselves and helps build confidence and separates us from everybody else is the work that we put in. What kind of work are we putting in on a regular, consistent basis that's going to help us build confidence and that's going to help us get to the point where we don't have to talk about what we want. We don't have to try to prove what we want. We're going to actually show what we want because we put in the hard work when nobody was watching, right? Here's the reality check. We all have the same 24 hours to get things done in life. So we're talking about being an athlete. You have the same 24 hours to do your training, to do your conditioning, to do your lifting. And then in regards to the stuff that I like to talk about, we want to add and include in that the ability to get our mental toughness work in. By the way, let me take a quick break. I'm on a little vacation. Even though I'm on vacation, doesn't mean that we can't put in that work. Goes right back to what I was just talking about. We have the same 24 hours. Everybody does. Question is, what are you going to do with those 24 hours, right? What are you going to do that's going to separate you from the norm, from the average? What are you going to do that's going to help you become the winner that you're trying to become, right? And when we talk about being a winner, we're talking about excelling at the next level, making your high school team, becoming a starter on your high school team, getting recruited, making it to play collegiately. Maybe not just getting on a college team, but actually going to college and actually figuring out a way to get on the field and actually play, right? I like this saying that I read. It says, Talent opens doors, foundation keeps you inside. So we think about that. If you're playing at a high level and you're an athlete, you may already have talent. So talent's going to get you looked at. Talent's going to get you in the door. Talent's going to get the recruiters to look at you. Talent's going to get you to make your teams. But what are you going to do to stay there? What are you going to do to keep that position? What are you going to do to even be better than whatever your talent got you to have doors open for you? That's the great separator. This foundation that we're talking about is the hard work, is the conditioning, is getting the mental training and the mental toughness to be able to be resilient when we meet hard times, which is 100% guaranteed that we're going to face some hard times as an athlete, especially the higher we get in competition from high school to club, from club to college. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we find a way to set the proper expectations for ourselves. So I told you before that I've been training for over a decade, and I've had the privilege of training some 40 plus athletes. The majority of them field hockey and or lacrosse players. One of my athletes that I train, very, very talented. So all the doors, like when I say all the doors will open for this athlete. This athlete was a starter as a freshman in high school. This athlete was highly recruited, was one of the best players on their travel or club team. June 15th, when colleges are allowed to reach out and talk to the athletes, this athlete had over 15, 16 calls from colleges who wanted to sign her, right? Solid player, good enough, made the team, but never really dominated on the field. So it could have been very easy for this athlete to be satisfied with the fact that, hey, I'm starting on both my high school and my club team. Could have been satisfied with the fact that they're being highly recruited all the time. And could have been satisfied with the fact that they had 16, 17, 18 phone calls from universities that wanted to offer her a scholarship to continue her career as a field hockey player. There were certain things that she dealt with, right, that are normal, right? Being inconsistent, having a great, great game. Then that game that was great was followed by a game that she felt she let herself down. She felt she let her teammates down. It wasn't necessarily what we would consider a bad game, but it was a game that didn't live up to her own expectations. She would get really, really nervous before games. A lot of time, nervousness comes from not knowing what you're capable of because you've been inconsistent doing it, right? Those who normally typically do not get nervous before games are your players who practice the hardest, and not just in practice, but they practice the hardest when they're doing things on their own when nobody else is watching. They're making their runs, they're getting their conditioning in. Some of them even go as far as hiring a skills coach and partake in those kind of training protocols. And so now when they do it over and over again, they have the confidence that they can do it. And so the games don't really faze them or bother them or make them nervous because they've done it a million times over before. Going into her last year in high school, she had a really huge transformation, right? She started to perform better. She started to be more consistent performing on the field. What was the turning point? Well, the turning point is we started to have more honest conversations. We started to have conversation in regards to addressing her mindset. What was she thinking? What was the purpose of her going into practice? What was she trying to get out of practice? We started having conversations about what her mindset was going into games. The warm-ups. How were you preparing in the warm-ups? Were you just going through the motions? Were you using it as time to kind of talk and be playful and joke around with your teammates? Or were you actually really getting prepared for the game? What were the things that you were saying to yourself, right? Was this moment becoming too big for you? Were you nervous about the game? Were you nervous about who you're playing with? Were you scared that you're not going to be able to perform, right? So we started having those real, honest to goodness conversations in regards to what's really going on in her head and how we can address those things, right? So what we did was we built an actual routine out. We built a routine in regards to carving out time. Okay, we talked about everybody has the same 24 hours. It's just a matter of what you do with those 24 hours. So we carved out time for her to do some skills stuff outside of practice on her own. We made sure that she was getting conditioning in at least 3 times a week. And then, we did lifting when we could. We tried to get lifting in at least once a week, if not twice a week in season. Sometimes that can be a little difficult. And then you have to make sure, your trainer understands how to train you and have lifting protocols for in season. And so we want to use those training protocols to keep you safe, keep you healthy, injury prevention, and more importantly, to make sure that you don't lose any strength as you go and get closer to the season. Because a lot of times with the rigors of the seasons and the practice and the games and so forth and so on, it gets a little difficult to get those workouts in. And then lastly, what we did, we tried to do visualization. Visualization we found is very, very key and very, very beneficial for athletes. Because like we said in our last episode that, if you visualize things in your mind's eye, it becomes real to you and your body, and you react naturally without really overthinking or thinking for that matter in regards to what you need to do in any given situation. So we started implementing visualization into her routine, and that seemed to help out a lot. How did it help out? Well, within a year of doing all this stuff and implementing so many things, and listen, she wasn't perfect. I wasn't perfect on getting her to implement all the things at the same time, but as we gone through and as we implemented these things and as we got more consistent at doing the different ones, state championship, player of the year for her district, player of the year for her region, and player of the year for the state. Then on top of that, top 10 recruit to a top 10 college. Then once she gets to college, she goes to this college, and actually her freshman year, the college ends up being in the top 5. And as a freshman, she got some good time playing and getting on the field and being a contributing member of that team as a freshman. She didn't find the confidence to be able to accomplish all of these things. She earned it. She worked hard at it. We came up with a plan. We identified some of the weaknesses. We identified things that we wanted to work on, and she worked hard at that. And she was consistent, and she built a foundation for herself that allowed her to be successful and that allowed her to build confidence as she got more successful in doing the things that she was working on. What we want to do is we want to figure out what's the demand of our sport, right? Every sport has its own language that it speaks, and it has its own set of rules that you have to abide by as an athlete in order to be successful. And so in field hockey, it's about speed, it's about decision making, it's about field vision or pitch vision. And then ultimately, it's about touches with the stick on the ball and keeping the ball on the stick as much as possible. The more reps you get working on those things, the more we're training our nervous system to stay calm under pressure so that regardless of what type of game it ends up being, whether it's a blowout or whether it's a close game and you're in college and it goes into overtime, it's a stressor that we have to be able to manage and we have to be able to get through. And a lot of that is done by training our nervous system, and we can train our nervous system by making sure that we're consistent in getting our reps in and working on, again, mental training, skills training, and conditioning. So what are some of the drills that people can do that I've seen make players successful in field hockey? First, touch work, followed by game speed passing, and followed by game speed, changing the direction and shot taking, all while making sure we're keeping that ball in your stick. Consistent micro sessions beat big ass marathon sessions and marathon workouts. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, some people don't find time on a weekly basis to be consistent about their training every single week. Some people think that, hey, well, if I spend 2 hours on a Saturday once a month, that's better than spending 20 minutes every single day and doing something. And the reality is, once a month doing 2 hours is not being consistent. The key in all of this stuff that we're talking about with this training, with not just our skills, but also with our conditioning and also with our mental training, the key in all of this is consistency. So the more we do it, the more reps we put in, the more consistent we are, the more confidence that we're going to build. Confidence comes from knowing what's going to happen in any given situation. So if you're constantly touching the ball, making your sprints, taking shots, you generally figure out and learn where the ball's going to go, how the ball's going to come off your stick, how your body's going to react, how your body's going to react when you're tired, how the body's going to react when you're, fresh, right? And if you're doing it right, you want to change up things, right? How's your body react as you get tired when you're just hydrating with water versus are you hydrating with electrolytes, right? Versus you prehydrate. Are you hydrating before you get into your games or your practices? How does your body react to that? How does your body react if you don't prehydrate and you do most of your hydrate during your practices or during your games, right? So we don't have the confidence to know exactly what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen, or why it's going to happen, unless we're putting ourselves in those different scenarios to see what our body does. So confidence comes from knowing what's going to happen. And now we don't have to guess, or we don't have to be scared about what's going to happen. Here's the thing, right? What we're talking about applies to not just field hockey. It applies to all sports, right? It applies to lacrosse, football, field hockey, soccer. If you're an adult and you're listening to this or you're watching this podcast, you play golf. It applies to that. Now, the conditioning part may not apply as much, but getting your reps, getting your touches, getting your swings in, paying attention to where your feet are, paying attention to your rotation, paying attention to where you're contacting the ball. Like, the more reps you get and the more times you do it, you're going to learn what happens. Where's the ball going to go if my shoulders are too far forward versus too far back? What happens if I don't put enough torque in my hips and rotate a little harder? What happens if my feet are offset versus if I have a nice strong foundation? Again, confidence comes from going through the motions and not having to guess what's going to happen, but have the confidence. No, you're not going to get it right every single time, but you'll be able to have the confidence that if you do it enough and you replicate it enough, you're going to have a pretty good idea and you're going to be a lot more consistent at getting the job done than if you're not practicing and you're not putting in the work and you're not earning the confidence that you're trying to get. Now, for my athletes that play field sports, we got to talk about this. We got to talk about conditioning. Fatigue exposes mindset. Jimmy Johnson, a famous football coach, had a saying that says, fatigue makes cowards of us all, right? What happens when you're fatigued? Everything bad happens when you're fatigued. You start thinking about things that are irrelevant. You're thinking about how tired you are. You're thinking about the lack of oxygen you're getting. You're thinking about your legs are tired. You're thinking about all the things except for the execution of a game, the execution of playing defense, the execution of being aggressive on offense. Conditioning builds belief. The more conditioned you are, the more you believe you can do things, and the more things you can actually do without getting tired. When your lungs give out, so does your focus. I've coached football and I've coached basketball. One of the things I used to always tell my athletes is when we're going through conditioning, pay attention to what you're doing when you're starting to get tired. Are you bent over a little more? Are your hands on your knees? Are you taking deep breaths? Are you holding your head up? Are you holding your head down? Pay attention to the things that you're doing when you get tired. Why? Well, when you're in competition, you can recognize those things, and now you know when that other person or that other team is tired, right? So it exposes, when you start to get tired and when you start to fatigue, it exposes some weak spots and you start doing things that you typically normally do subconsciously and you're not aware of it. And you really, sometimes you can't even stop it because it's just what happens when you get tired. So you can actually give yourself an unfair advantage if you're paying attention to these small things. So what can we do to make sure that we don't fall prey and fall into these holes, into these different things? Well, one of the smartest things that you can do is you can put yourself in a scenario where your condition is game specific. So what kind of runs do you make in your sport? How long are those runs? How long do those sprints typically normally last? Are there 20-second sprints with, 20 seconds rest before you probably have to get back and do it again? Is a play 40 seconds long and then you get, 25 seconds before the next play starts? So if you can understand the demands of your sport, you can actually, excuse me, these kids in the background are crazy. If you understand the demands of your sport, you can start training and making sure you're doing game-specific conditioning. And then what you want to do is also simulate what I would say the length of a game. So, if you're playing games in quarters, you know how long each quarter lasts, right? The biggest challenge that I see for field athletes is they're not ready for the fourth quarter. They get into the fourth quarter, things are hard, they're tired, they've been doing a lot of running, especially if you're on a team that doesn't have a lot of substitutes, so you're not allowed to get out of the game as a player, and you end up playing a lot of minutes. By the time you get to the fourth quarter, you're usually gassed, you're a little tired, and it's hard for you to kind of put yourselves, get ready for those situations. Well, you know what? That means you're not training in the best manner that you can. You're not simulating those game situations. Another thing that I see a lot of times is, I see this more on the high school level because you have such a wide gap in skill sets for your players in high school. But in high school, this is a case in the team that I coached on. Our top 3, 4, 5 players are so good that by the time the third quarter comes in, they're getting rest and they hardly ever play a fourth quarter. Now, that's cool, that's nice, that's awesome, that's sweet. Challenge is this. When you get to the playoffs, and the stakes are higher, and you don't get a chance to rest because the games are closer, now how are you performing? Is that third quarter harder to play? Is that fourth quarter harder to play? In my experience, yes. The answer to those questions is yes, because they're not used to playing in that third quarter and they're not used to playing in that fourth quarter, right? And in some cases, they're not even training to prepare for that third and that fourth quarter. So there's a struggle there, and there's a challenge that comes with that. But if you prepare yourself for those things, that challenge and that struggle is not as bad, right? So we want to make sure that we're doing game-specific conditioning in order to create a good foundation. We're doing all this to build a habit and being consistent doing these things. But we're also doing this for, more importantly, to build some confidence. A lot of times our lack of confidence comes from not knowing what the outcome is going to be in any given scenario because we haven't put ourselves in those positions, or we haven't been consistent working through those things in order to know what the outcome of that stuff is. Why does all this matter? Well, an athlete plays fearless with no anxiety and with aggression when they know they're not going to run out of gas. When they know for a fact that they can get through a full game regardless of what the scenario is, regardless of how close the game is, they don't put things in reserve. Talking about field hockey, one of the major recruitment things with field hockey is our tournaments. These girls sometimes don't know if they're going to play 2 games, 3 games, 6 games, or 8 games. A lot of times it's depending on how many games they lose versus how many games they win. So a lot of times you see what we call tournament play, where these athletes will conserve energy in their gameplay because they're afraid that they're not going to have enough energy if they have to play that 3rd, 4th, 6th, or 7th game. Well, if we're conditioning properly and we're doing game-specific conditioning, And we're doing things that put us in a situation where you know exactly how hard you can push yourself. That it's a lot easier to play fearless in those situations. It's a lot easier to give 100% and go all out and try to make a difference on the pitch when you know what you're capable of. We only get that confidence by getting those reps in and preparing and training properly for those scenarios and for those situations. The best feeling on the field is knowing that the other team is tired and you're not. You want to talk about an adrenaline rush. You want to talk about having an ability to push to another level. Look across that pitch. Look across that field and see, that other team dragging butt a little bit, and it becomes a lot easier for you to pick up that energy and to play a little more aggressively and play a little more fearless. Now, what you want to make sure you do is you're not becoming that other team's best feeling, and you're not the one getting tired. And they're looking at you and like, oh, we can pick this up because I know that, so-and-so's tired. Let's go at them. Let's attack them. Let's be a little more aggressive. The other part of that is this. You want to be more aggressive, but if you're not in condition and you're not in shape, you don't have anything to pull from in order to be more aggressive when you have the opportunity to take advantage of your opponents not being prepared. So create a structure for yourself, create a program for yourself, be consistent doing it. And then, all the little key factors with conditioning, we want to make sure we're consistently getting enough sleep. We want to make sure we're fueling ourselves. We want to make sure we're hydrating ourselves. All these things are done in order to support our conditioning and our training. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is strength. The stronger you are, the more strength you have, the more power you can generate. You're going to be a lot stronger player, right? And at some point in time, even though it's not a physical game, supposedly, but at some point in time, you're going to get into some kind of situation in your sport on a field where you have to be strong and stable to combat somebody being physical, whether they're being physical within the confines of the game or they're being a little bit too aggressive and a little bit too physical. You want to make sure you're strong enough to be able to handle that, because trust me, as a coach myself, I pay attention to that. The stronger you are, the less likely that you're going to get injured. One of the reasons why we do a lot of strength training is for injury prevention. When you're strength training and you're doing all the right things, you're going to be available. You're going to be able to be on the field more often than not. You're going to be able to be on the field longer. Strong athletes don't second guess what they're capable of doing because, again, the consistency of working out, being in the weight room, doing things that are sport specific to your sport in regards to handling any kind of physicality, you don't really think about it. You don't second guess what you're capable and what you are able to do on the field. When we're talking about strength and we're talking about field hockey, we want to make sure that we're concentrating on lower body power, single leg balance, core endurance, shoulder health, lower back. And we want to make sure we have the proper glute strength, because all those muscles are major factors into being able to perform on the pitch as a field hockey player. Again, goes back to what I said earlier. Everybody has the same 24 hours. How are you going to use your 24 hours, right? Because I promise you there's somebody else using their 24 hours to get stronger. I promise you there's somebody else using their 24 hours to get faster. And I promise you there's somebody else who's finding time to make sure they work out and make sure that they're getting in the things that they need to get in. Availability is a skill because you can't leave from the bench. You're not available because you're always hurt, because you're getting pushed around, because we have to pull you off the field because the players on the other side are physically stronger than you and they're moving you around, that you're becoming ineffective. Not much you can do being on a bench. You're not going to be able to help your team. You're not going to be able to affect your team in a positive way, besides cheerleading, if you're on a bench. Talked about all the physical things that we can do that's going to help build our confidence. Now let's talk about how, in fact, can we use the mental side of things that's going to help build our confidence. Every single rep, every single run, every single lift is a receipt. It's a receipt to what you're capable of. It's a receipt to what you can do. You can only show your receipts when they're asked for. You can say that you're running. You can say that you're putting in time with your skill sets. You can say that you're lifting. But guess what? When it's time to show if you've really been doing it in the midst of a game, not just everybody else watching you, but you're going to know if you've done it or not. So what's your receipts going to show? Are your receipts going to show that you're just a bunch of talk and you really ain't doing it? Or are your receipts going to show what you're capable of because you put in the work, you put in the time, you found time to do it, and you put in the reps, and you created a nice, strong foundation and had great habits in regards to doing it. Those who are the most consistent are the most successful. Those who are the most consistent provides the most proof of what they're capable of. And those who are the most consistent usually doesn't have to deal with doubt at the same level as those who are not consistent. We're going to always have doubts. It's part of our DNA, part of who we are. We're going to doubt ourselves. We're going to have a bad day. We're going to have a bad game. We're going to have a bad practice, right? And when we have those bad moments, it creates doubt in our heads sometimes. But you're going to have less doubt and you're going to deal with that less the more consistent you are in regards to getting in your skill sessions, getting in your runs, and getting in your lifts. When the anxiety hits us, especially before games, when we know what we're capable of, that confidence usually kicks in and it will quiet that noise, right? You know, it will help us become more calm in those situations. It'll help us draw mentally. We talked about visualization, right? It'll help us draw from our mental Rolodex, so to speak, all those different reps, all those times, all those hours we spent lifting, all those hours we spent sprinting. And we won't be in a situation where we're on the field not knowing what to do or not feeling like we don't know what to do. When in actuality, we do because we put in the time, the work, and the effort. And we should be able to pull our own receipts at that particular time and moment. You can't fake preparation. Your body knows. And more important, your mind knows, right? That's where that fear comes from. That's where that doubt comes from. When we don't put in the time and we don't prepare properly, then we have a lot of questions. When we prepare properly, our mind remembers what we've done. And that's when we get to a point where, you know, you hear our coaches telling you all the time, stop thinking. Well, that's what we mean. Trust your work, trust your training, trust your preparation, and let that work show itself in those times. Let your receipts be cashed in when you need them to cash in for you. Visualization is huge for this. You know, we play over and over again. So here's one of the examples I give with the visualization. I do this all the time, and it's crazy how well it works, and it's crazy how it affects my athletes, right? So there's always a session where we're doing runs or sprints, right? And so, you know, I clock my players. One of the best ways to make sure your players are putting forth effort, and those who've trained with me know this, I'll put a clock on you, and then your job is to make sure that you're running the fastest you can run, right? Well, one of the things that I do is when they're having problems being consistent with their numbers and their runs, I'll tell them before their next run, stand at the start line, close their eyes, visualize how fast you're running, visualize perfect form, visualize the time that you want to get. 9 times out of 10, when they open their eyes and they take off and they run, they get a better time. That's the power of visualization. That's what visualization does for you. So you want to make sure you use that and do, use all these different tools in order for you to get the best out of yourself. And so for you to be able to build that confidence through the evidence that you built on a weekly and a daily basis for yourselves. So what are some of the things that we can do that you can take from this conversation? I'll just give you a couple of things that I think that will help build a nice structure for you. We want to focus on 20 to 30 minutes doing some kind of still work. stick touches, shooting, whatever the case may be, keeping the ball on your stick as you're doing sprints, anything that will help you in a game setting or a game scenario. Now, if you are an advanced player and you know yourself, think back to what do you struggle with in a game, right? If you're struggling with keeping the ball on your stick as you're sprinting because you keep losing it, work on that. If you have a hard time, entering in the circle and making a shot, work on that. But we want to use 20 to 30 minutes to work on some skill stuff. When it comes to conditioning, we want to make sure we get 15 minutes of speed work or interval work that is game specific. Strength, we want to get, depending on where you are, how much time you have and all that kind of stuff, in season, out of season, we want to try to get, 2 days, 3 days of some kind of total body lifts. And then every single day you have to, mandatory, non-negotiable. Every single day you have to do some kind of mental training, whether it's visualization, whether it's journaling. I make my athletes who are in my program do an hour-long mental coaching session with me every week, and we identify what the goal is for the next 7 days, in regards to what mental things we're going to do to help you get better. Always have a weekly goal for yourself. You want to make sure that whatever items that you define in regards to what you're going to work on skill-wise, conditioning-wise, mental-wise, what have you, win as many of those as you can get. Make sure you're checking those off as best as you can. And make sure you're writing this down. Writing things down has been scientifically proven to help stick and help you remember a lot better than if you're typing it in your phones, or if you're, doing voice memos to your phone. We want to make sure that we're actually writing this stuff down. It will stick with you longer. It will stay in your mind. It will stay in the forefront of your mind. And it will help you actually be more successful when it comes to that. Parents, here's something for you. Ask what your win was today, and not did you do something today. We want to keep a positive spin on this in order for our athletes to keep moving in a positive direction. So as we finish up this conversation, we're talking about confidence. You have to do the work. You have to see improvement. These things will help you feel capable, and they will help you perform better, right? And once you understand those 4 things, we want to make sure that we're repeating those 4 things in regards to everything that we do. Do the work, see the improvement. You see the improvement, you're going to feel more capable. You feel more capable, you're going to perform better. Creating consistent habits that you repeat over and over again is the thing that makes us more confident. The more confidence you have because you're doing things, you're actually performing and doing these things, the better our body is going to perform, and the more successful we're going to be. So here's the thing. Here's what I want you to do. Here's my challenge for you. Commit to 20 minutes of skill set for 7 straight days. Let me know if you can do that. I would love to hear from you if you were able to do that. And if you don't do 7, that's fine. Let me rephrase that. It's not fine. If you don't do 7, still try to get as many days as you can in, and let me know. Let me know how many you got, and we can discuss offline, what were some of the challenges so we can help correct those things. Record 1 day at a time, and as you record it, writing it down in a journal. At the end of those 7 days, compare those days and see where the consistencies are, see what the differences are, and see what the inconsistencies are. And that's how you start to get better, by addressing those things. Parents, I want you to notice effort, not outcome, right? Let them see that it's the process that counts more than the result. To recap what we talked about in this episode, skills build control, conditioning builds belief, strength builds trust, and together they build you a nice, strong foundation. And the more consistent you are, the stronger that foundation becomes. Always remember that, and always repeat that. Your foundation determines your ceiling, and your confidence is built, not given. So, thank you. Let's talk about it.